Hello everyone, it's Tuesday night. Welcome to Winning Biblical Keys to a Winning Lifestyle. I'm just looking at myself, I've got so many layers on, it's been so cold. I hope that all of you who are watching from somewhere that's warm and and I really, when I look at how cold it is, I really feel for guys who don't have what we have, and it just makes me extra grateful. So tonight, a cold good evening, cold hi there Tuesday night winning. So if you're joining me for the first time, welcome. So good to have you with us. My name is Debbie and I am the lead pastor at A City Church in Kenilworth, an awesome church, an amazing church full of incredible people. And I'm really looking forward to tonight, which is part 2. Hey Candace, part 2 of overcoming problems, and we were looking at depression. Hello Nikki. And last week we sort of looked at causes. Remember the distinction between feelings of depression and being diagnosed with depression. There is a big difference. Remember, if you've missed any of these, you can just jump onto Facebook and you can, hey Zama, and you can pick up any of the episodes that you've missed. Last week was a good one because it looked at just defining feelings of depression and what is depression. Looked at possible causes. Just remember that the angle I'm taking is from a Christian approach. I'm not coming in from a psychiatrist or from a psychologist's perspective, bearing in mind that as you're dealing with feelings of depression or you're going through depression, all of these people have a huge part to play in the multidisciplinary approach in moving towards wholeness. So I think it's very important to make sure that you don't self-diagnose, and if you're not sure if you have depression or just dealing with feelings of depression, you need to get yourself checked by someone who has actually studied for that, and Dr. Google has not studied for that. Hey Elaine, good to see you. So just in a nutshell, the big difference between feelings of depression and depression. Feelings of depression is where you may feel some of the criteria that helps people to evaluate depression, but you only feel it for a day, maybe 2 days. You go into that, you come out of it, and you're able to move on. If you have, hey there, good to see you. Good to see you, Linda. If you have depression, then you have a number of the criteria I listed last night consistently for a period of 2 weeks or more, and it's very difficult for you to come out of that independently. So just be very clear in terms of what you're facing so that you don't mistreat, i.e. using the wrong treatment for what you think you have when actually you don't. So tonight I want to look at I'm going to touch on a couple of things, looking at just very simple things. Remember, a lot of this is just really about practical keys and tools that you can apply. It's not diving deep into it. It's giving you things that you can use as a lay person. And I'm going to touch on tonight, if you know someone who has feelings of depression or going through depression, how you can support them. There's always a wrong way and a right way, and I think sometimes the wrong way can just exacerbate the whole problem and make it 1,000 times worse. So with all of these things, remember, God is Jehovah Rophi. He is our healer. But God also works through people He's given the ability to study psychology, psychiatry, people who have put together medication. So you need to do, hey Queen and King, you need to get the help. If you find you're going through these things and you're not coming through it on your own, it's okay. If you need help, then you need to get it. Hey Jen, good to see you. And that's our responsibility. No one was meant to go through something all by themselves. Remember, in this series on overcoming life's problems, God's always put resources there. He knew that we'd face challenges. That's why he said, in this world are many troubles, but take heart, I've overcome them all. He knew that they would come. He's given you resources, and it's important that you reach out and use those. I think from a counselor's perspective, hey Ayanda, any situation that you're facing, the starting point is always admitting, I've got a problem. There's a problem here and I need help. That's always the starting point. And you know what? Everyone goes through crises. Everyone, I think, faces feelings of depression. And those who experience depression, it's a lot of people. So you're not on your own. There's always hope in the Lord, and there's always a way forward. Last week I shared the story. Hey Delia, last week I shared the story on the black dog, and it was such an apt description on what it feels like to face depression, people looking in on your journey. And I just think it's, if you missed that, you can get last week's episode, but it gives good insight on how to understand people who are dealing with depression. So are you ready for tonight? Remember, it's very important to share, particularly these kinds of things that may not be directly applicable to you. But if you feel it's going to bless someone, then share it and comment. Love your comments. Maybe if you've got questions, you can just ask. And very excited tonight that I've been talking every week about Finding Me, which is my first book. My website's up and running, so debbiesloan.com. Pop on there and you can have a look at how to order your book and also how to get a weekly devotional. And there may be some of you who've joined me tonight who've signed up to be part of the devotional, which also promotes Live Online on a Tuesday night. So we're one big happy family. So come on, let's get into tonight. Lord, bless us, help us understand in Jesus' name. And may the Lord meet you at your point of need tonight. Whatever you're facing, He always has your next. It's never over in the Lord. Can we prevent depression? It's a loaded question because we don't control what happens to us. We're not fortune tellers who are able to see into the future, then pull back into the present and put preventative measures in place. We can't do that. But what we can do is that we can manage and navigate what we face and its influence on us. You've heard the saying, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control what happens in us as a result of what we're facing. And I think that, knowledge always brings freedom. And I'm hoping that this two-part that we've done on depression gives you a little bit more insight and a little bit more understanding. Because when you have knowledge and understanding, you're not kind of feeling your way in the dark. It gives clarity. And I think when there's clarity and when there's knowledge, there's a little less that's left to assumption and the unknown. I think one of the big factors for us as humans is the element of the unknown. It can heighten anxiety. But then also the faith element comes in where God doesn't show us everything in terms of our future, because He wants us to rely and to depend on Him. That's faith. But when it comes to can we prevent depression, I think my answer to that is we can't control what happens to us, but we can be better equipped in overcoming challenges. And that's what the premise is for tonight. So I think there are some things that we can deal with that can maybe lessen and decrease feelings of depression, or maybe slightly lessen the impact of depression on our lives. Last week we did speak about, sin elements that can create depression or feelings of depression, like harboring bitterness, living in guilt avenue, harboring unforgiveness. All that's going to do is just corrode away at your insides. So if we have those kinds of sin issues, deal with it. And we deal with it by confess, apologize, change, and make right the wrong as far as possible. You can't live with, I just think so often in counseling when people just make wrong decisions. And I don't judge people. We all make wrong decisions. We all, for intelligent people, can sometimes be very silly. And often when we make those wrong decisions, there are consequences. But God's given us the ability to fix it. And that's through the gift of seeking his forgiveness, admittance, seeking forgiveness, changing, and then making right the wrong as far as possible. Please note, not all depression and feelings of depression is caused by sin. There's a lot of people that preach, if you're suffering with depression, well, then you must be a sin-filled person. And that's not true. There are many reasons as to why people have feelings of depression and face depression. Luke 19 verse 41 is one of the shortest verses in scripture, and it's just 2 words, and it's with reference to Jesus. He wept. Jesus' soul was overcome to the point of death in the Garden of Gethsemane. He experienced feelings of depression. Job, in Job 3, he knew great depression when he'd lost absolutely everything. His friends were useless and just making him feel worse. Then you get Jeremiah, who's known as the weeping prophet, the depressed prophet. I think in these particular cases, particularly with Job and Jeremiah, and in your own example, in your own case, sometimes grief turned inward can trigger depression. We all feel grief because we all face loss, and grief is a byproduct of loss. But when we don't process the grief and we just sit with it, it can trigger depression. So what's the preventative measure there? Deal with grief. There's the 5 stages of going through grief. If you need counseling to assist you in processing, then get it, because that can lessen the likelihood of dealing with depression or feelings of depression. God's in the business of exchange. He says he gives us the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. I love that. I love where we can admit and give to God, and there's that amazing exchange. Such a powerful scripture, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. I think too, last week I spoke about, if we become overly fatigued, if we're not living a balanced life, well, we're setting ourselves up for your system shutting down. So another preventative measure is avoid overcommitment where possible. Avoid fatigue, improper rest, poor diet, lack of exercise. Live being responsible. You've only got one body. And if you think about it, your body does a lot for you. It's thinking, it's communicating. All the wheels inside are making sure that your heart functions, that your brain functions, that your sensory nervous system functions. This is a whole factory. It's a business that's constantly working. And all your body asks for in return is balance. Sleep, diet, exercise. But I think sometimes we take for granted that the factory's functioning. So, be responsible, be a good steward. We also looked at last week, if you are not nurturing your spiritual being, if you're not reading scripture daily, then that means you're starving and depleting your inner person of spiritual nutrients, and anything starved of nutrients is going to not function. It's the law of averages. So feed your spiritual life, feed yourself as a physical being, and those are good. I'm not saying if you do that you'll never get feelings of depression or face depression. I'm not saying that, but it's a good preventative measure. When we are weakened physically and spiritually, we're very vulnerable to the enemy's attacks. We become very susceptible because, your defenses are down and lowered. So keep yourself strong It's not difficult to do that. It just takes consistency. Like do it every day and then repeat and repeat and repeat. Sometimes unresolved problems can cause depression. Unmet needs that are consistently being unmet can cause depression. You know, that's what the self-care, self-aware. It's like, what do I need today? What do I need in my day? What am I lacking today that I need? And as far as possible, get it. If there's unresolved problems and you seem to be going around the same issue over and over and over again, maybe you just need a different perspective. And that's often where the counseling process is incredibly helpful. It just gives a different perspective. You know, there's only so many ideas and potential solutions that you can come up with. Sometimes you just need an injection from another source. Hey, Perpetua, good to see you with us. I think there's great therapy in reaching out to others. Brené Brown did, in fact, is on Netflix at the moment, where she gives you insight into her thinking. And let's be honest, if there was a monitor attached to our brain that screamed what we think, it would be quite scary because we overanalyze, we are oversensitive, we create scenarios that are so far from the truth. If someone blue ticks but doesn't respond on WhatsApp, you can go into a whole big thing that's just not the truth. The person maybe just got called into a meeting, couldn't answer you immediately. But in here, there's all these scenarios, there's all these Netflix dramas. And sometimes when it comes to reaching out to others, breaking out of the inner world of just going around and around your own thinking, actually reaching out and getting involved in someone else's life can diffuse the egocentric self-obsessiveness that we have by nature with ourselves. You know, there's nothing more powerful than identifying a need in someone else and being their solution instead of just becoming your own problem. I'm not saying that you're a problem child, but I know how this works. And sometimes you need to actually just step outside of yourself and reach into someone else's space. And that's a biblical principle, because when you're focusing on what's important to God, He's focusing on what's important to you. And sometimes we actually need to just step outside of ourselves. So those are, I guess, ways of just living intentionally and responsibly, which certainly will not eradicate depression and feelings of depression, but it can perhaps lessen the depth to which you experience those things. You know, there's nothing worse than crisis management, where when you hit a problem, that's when you start reading all the books, praying harder and harder. That's cool, but it's so much better to live prepared. Not that you're living waiting for depression to come, but live prepared. Live where you're feeding yourself spiritually all the time. That's like your lifestyle. Live where you're looking after you. Make that a lifestyle, not just an event that precedes crisis. It's a lifestyle. So I love the helping others aspect. You know, if you look at Job and his friends, hey then, if you look at Job and his friends, not good. Just loading on the guilt. You know, it's your fault and it's you and you're doing stuff wrong. Offering no helpful assistance whatsoever, even accusing him of sinning against God. So let's look at what are unhelpful ways to assist someone who's facing depression or feelings of depression. Don't ever tell them, don't worry. All that does is shoots up the worry barometer. It's very condescending, and although we may mean well, it can actually be perceived as quite artificial. It's like almost like, you know, when you greet someone, it's hello, how are you? But do we really want to know how they are, or is it just sort of a polite way of greeting someone? And sometimes saying don't worry, we think, but that's what I need to say. But it's not the right thing to say always to someone who's going through what is causing them huge amounts of anxiety. Don't do a gaslighting. Gaslighting is where you create the impression that the person is over accentuating something. Gaslighting minimalizes what someone's feeling. It almost erases what they're feeling. We can't do that. You can't say to someone, don't feel anxious. They're feeling what they're feeling, and we can't, people aren't robots where you just say, don't feel that, you're not going to feel it. People need to process what they're feeling. So don't say to someone who's going through depression, you're just oversensitive. Because that's really just minimalizing and negating what they're feeling and the seriousness of what they're feeling in terms of the feeling's impact on their life. Don't say something like, get over yourself. Don't say something, you'll get better soon. Maybe they won't be better soon. Maybe this is a journey that they have to go on, and it's not going to be tomorrow morning they'll wake up and they'll feel awesome. I think too, something to avoid is if you're speaking to someone who's going through stuff, don't make it about you. If you feel the Lord wants you to share your story, then do it. But don't share your story just because you feel that that's helpful. Often it's not. They don't want to hear about you. They want you to listen to them. So what is helpful? If you know someone is going through a difficult time, just be there. Don't try and fix it. Don't offer solutions. I think sometimes men battle in this area because men are logical. There's a problem, solution, fix it. Done. What's the issue? So in counseling men who've journeyed with a spouse or a family member who's dealing with depression, it's very hard for a man because it's problem, solution, fix it, done. But when depression goes on and on and on and on, they have to relearn a whole way of seeing emotions. And sometimes the person who's going through depression doesn't want to be told what they need to do. They just want to be heard. Just listen. Just listen to me. I think acknowledging that the person is feeling what they're feeling. So, for example, to say, I can see that you're hurting, or I can see what you're going through is very painful. There's so much healing in the identification of acknowledgement of what someone's feeling. That shows that you value them, that you esteem them, that you're really leaning into where they are at. It's so helpful. Your role as someone journeying with someone who's facing these things, as I said, it's not to fix, it's to encourage, it's to listen, it's to give hope, it's to ask questions like, what can I do for you today? Making statements like, I'm here, I'm listening. Making a statement like, I don't always understand, but I am here for you. Because sometimes we don't understand. So don't pretend to. Just offer what you can offer. I'm here and I can listen. I think consistency in how you see the person who's going through what they're going through. So it's things like, I love you the same. I don't see you any differently. And that's so important because there's a lot of shame around depression and feelings of depression, because it's like, I'm not functioning. What are people going to think? Are you going to think less of me? That often prevents people from reaching out because there's shame. So when you say to them, I love you the same and I don't see you any differently, that's two powerful statements. I think another thing that's helpful is to say, take your time. When people are sharing, take your time. I'm not leaving. I'm here to listen. I just remember when my mom, quite a few years ago, underwent a bilateral mastectomy, and she developed depression as a result of that. And not knowing what to do, like seeing my mom kind of just depleting before me, becoming very withdrawn. I'd phone, I've lived away from my parents because our ministry's always taken us so that we've lived apart. And I would phone daily and my mom wouldn't come to the phone to speak to me. She just couldn't. Becoming totally insular, becoming totally disconnected. Extreme feelings of anxiety, illogical thinking. God doesn't love me anymore. I'm not going to go to heaven. And just seeing that constant being depleted, and then really praying into that and getting the right help for her, which was critical. And in her case, it was to come under the care of a psychiatrist and a psychologist. And the minute she got the right help, the minute she got that, she was on the road to recovery. But it was very hard when you don't know what to do. And in that case, we just prayed. I remember praying with my dad on the phone. What are we going to do? We need direction here because what we're trying isn't working. And then the Lord opened the door. We were able to get her the right medication and she overcame that. So be encouraged. God's in it with you. Nothing can separate you from the Lord. But I think the big thing for us, it was listening to my mom, listening to the Lord, and really just reaching out. You know, we started off with a GP. We started off with Christian counseling, and it wasn't enough. All good, all very good, but not enough for my mom. And then getting to the place where we got what she needed. And today she's great. She's great. You know, I read a post this morning that said, depression isn't always suicide notes and pill bottles. It's also spending when someone you know just spends all day in bed. I'm not saying that if you're having a chillaxed Saturday, that means you've got depression. I'm talking when it's out of character and there's no reason for it. Someone who fakes a smile. It's very easy to see when someone's faking a smile, because if these aren't smiling, their heart isn't, because the eyes are the window to the soul. I think someone who's always cracking jokes can sometimes be masking what's happening underneath the jokes. Someone who's constantly emotionally distant. Someone who's either overeating, not eating. Someone who's skipping work to sleep. Someone who doesn't shower for days at a time. I'm not saying if your kids don't shower for days at a time, they're facing depression. It means they just don't like showering. And then that social isolation. So, you know, there's not one diagnosis for what causes depression. And I think it's listen and actually see people. Don't just look at people and see, oh, there's person A, B, and C. It's, Lord, help me to see what you want me to see so that I can be of assistance to someone. Key scriptures are always critical in journeying through any challenge and overcoming any problem that we face. I've pulled out 2 for tonight that I really felt the Lord wanted me to share. And the first one, Isaiah 43 verse 2, when you go through deep waters, I will be with you. Because sometimes when you're going through depression, it can be very lonely because it feels like it's just you. I love the statement, God didn't bring you this far to only bring you this far. There's always moving through what you're facing. Always. God didn't bring you to a place where you're experiencing what you're experiencing through whatever reason to just leave you there. He didn't bring you this far to only bring you this far. Psalm 23, my favorite. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He leads me beside quiet waters. He knows what you need when you need it. And a shepherd will lay down his life for the sheep, which Jesus did for us. But the level of care that Jesus has for you as your shepherd is he will meet you where you are, lead you through what you're facing, right through onto the other side. I find that so encouraging. As we land tonight, just a couple of other methods to try if you are feeling what we've been speaking about last week and tonight, or know someone who is. Behavioral activation is really powerful, and the bottom line with that is simply doing something that brings enjoyment and meaning to your life. You know, depression often deactivates where you just become immobilized. And then it makes us feel bad about ourselves. So come in with the opposite. Do something that does something for you. Maybe it's I'm using my favorite store, sorry. Maybe it's just walking through Woolies and just feeling the fabric. You know, what does it for you? What blows your hair back? That's called behavioral activation, because it releases something within you. Make an effort to socialize. Be with people who make you feel safe. Isolation exacerbates depression because it just increases your time to be able to think and ruminate. And it's just going around and around and around, and it builds these massive things which just increase what you're feeling. So socialize with people you feel safe with. Challenge unhelpful thoughts. So for example, ask yourself, was my thought appropriate for the situation? Was there an imbalance in the act and my thought response? Is there a disproportionate magnitude of feelings of whatever you're feeling compared to the trigger? So ask yourself, what evidence do I have that the thought is true? What would be an alternative, more plausible reason? So there's a double blue tick and the person hasn't responded. Hashtag they are at work, even though they're working from home. You know, so challenge your thinking. I think affirming thoughts are always good. Things like, I am enough. I am stronger than what I was yesterday. I have a voice. It matters. I love the question, what would an extraordinary version of you do today? You know, so it's challenge your thinking and give yourself a break as I close. Give yourself a break when you need one. Give yourself grace when you make a mistake. Celebrate your wins, even if no one else does. Give yourself permission to ask for help when you need it. Speak to yourself the way you speak to others you care about. That's a big one. Bad days don't mean you're having a bad life. You're just having a bad day. Have empathy. Attempt to imagine living life in the shoes of other people and recognize how hard it can be. Be kind, because not everyone is as fortunate as you. So I hope tonight that you found it practical and helpful. Remember, take one thing that you're going to apply in your life, because that's what makes winning practical and helpful. So don't just leave everything. Pick that one thing. Maybe as I'm speaking, pick that one thing that you're going to apply. And just know there's always hope in the Lord, even for the most harsh of circumstances that you're facing. There's always hope in Jesus. Have an awesome week, awesome people. Can't wait to see you next Tuesday, same place, same time, hopefully different weather conditions, and hopefully I won't be wearing 42 layers. God bless all of you. Bye.